Hi there. Welcome to Startup Steroid. Today I am interviewing Sumeet Maniar. He is the CEO of WellBrain, and this is a really interesting company and really interesting story. So I'm excited to share this with you. Just a quick intro. Sumeet is a serial entrepreneur. He has raised capital for his previous company and taken it all the way through to exit, $200 million exit. So this is obviously not his first go around. This is not his first rodeo, as we say. Um, and he has tons of experience running and managing startups. So he was actually hired into WellBrain, as we'll share in the story. But in addition, the WellBrain has already raised $2 million in their seed round, and this is essentially their late seed round. Initially, they were targeting a $3 million capital raise for this round. They're pushing that up to $5 million because they already have commitments for about 3.5, and have, if we include soft circle, that number goes up to about 4.5 million. So they already are doing a fantastic job raising capital, have a significant amount of revenue to back that up. So this is a really interesting story if you are looking for an investment opportunity. A quick disclaimer before we get started. This is not investment advice, that we are not making any kind of recommendation. This interview is only the first step in the due diligence process. So if you do continue on to do a full due diligence and invest in the company, our hope is that this interview gets you started on the right foot. Uh, if you are an investor and you have more questions, or if you want to get in touch with Sumeet directly, please use my email address on screen right now. It'll be on screen again at the end of the interview, and it's also in the description below. So feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions and put you in touch with Sumeet if that's what you are looking for. If you are a company, or if you're an entrepreneur and have your own company and are looking to raise capital for your company, please get in touch with us also. Go to startupsteroid.com, click on the founder link, and give us your information. So this way we get you connected into our database, and hopefully we can help you with our network to raise capital and help you take your company to the next level. So having said that, let's get into the interview. Sumit, thank you so much for coming on today. I am really excited about learning more about you, your background, and WellBrain, the company that you're heading off right now. So let's get me started with a little bit about you, your background, how you sort of progressed. I know you have interesting entrepreneurial background also beyond WellBrain. So let's start with that, and then we'll talk about the company more specifically.
Sure. Thanks for having me here. And again, with everyone, my name is Sumeet Maniar. And effectively, the nuts and bolts of my background is electrical engineering, computer engineering, Purdue University, then MBA from University of Chicago. I did a bunch of corporate stuff, management consulting, telecommunications. And then for the last 20 years, I've done various types of startups, both B2B, B2B2C, and B2C, and have scaled them to growth with some exits. And then also with respect to digital health, I segued into that area because I became an advisor to a lead investor that was into WellBrain, but we can get into that later. So that's my background in itself, mostly in the US. I've also done startups in other countries, so which have its own challenges as well. So a global perspective, if you will.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so that the last company that you exited was, just to get an idea, how many years ago was that?
Okay, so there was one company that was exited into a strategic investor, and that was part of an Australian company, and it was back in Australia. That was probably 2013, 2014. Okay. It was a Scalify. It was a scaling network backend solution, which a lot of my history in the startup world actually emanated from the online internet game space, and we were pioneers in the industry, but that has segued into many different aspects that I've touched upon in my career. And proven a direct benefit into what we're doing in digital health, which I'll explain later. But yes, and then before that, there was another exit. When we were in the game space, we created everything firsthand. Payment systems and chat systems and data warehouse in the sky, and all of these are businesses unto themselves. And our payment system got spun off and eventually it got sold into Visa for a couple hundred million.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And all of those skill sets obviously are very important in developing a health technology, right? So
Yeah.
the experience is perfect for that kind of a transition. And then the way you got connected to WellBrain was you were initially an advisor to the company, to the CEOs that were there. So tell me a little bit about that relationship, how you actually were introduced to the company, and what that initial phase was like.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of co-working space, this was a non-WeWork co-working space, and it had a flat floor of like 50 companies. And the benefits of that was we were interacting with so many different companies and entities. And literally, I met the two partners who had started Launchpad Digital Health. And they saw my background, and I was doing another company at that time and leading that efforts. And they liked my gaming background and all the experiences I've had in fundraising and all these other aspects. So they asked me to be an advisor and kind of be the gaming expert for all their portfolio companies, just to look at that. And then gradually, they also asked me to help evaluate deal day, demo day companies. And so as part of that aspect, that's how I then expressed an interest. I wanted to do something operationally. And they said, hey, you had rated one of these companies quite high. And then that's how they asked me to, I ended up joining one of their portfolio companies through that.
So that company was WellBrain, right? That the
Yes.
company that you had rated very high, that you
Yeah.
really liked. So tell me, what was that initial rating based on? What was the criteria? Were you looking at the team, the product, the execution?
Yeah. So I've done angel investments myself, but at the time, yeah, they had given us a worksheet, the principles of Launchpad Digital Health, and we effectively had to review on certain aspects and then our own personal feelings. So yes, it'd be the standard team, capability, some whiz bang, there has to be some sexiness or appeal to it.
Right.
And then over all those factors, and this is like 3.5, 4 years ago, so I don't remember all those details, but
Yeah.
I think it was a score, like a average score, weighted average score, somewhere on a scale of 1 to 10. So I must have given it a 7.5 to 8 or 9. I never give anyone 10, but
right.
But yeah, it was all those parameters that I must have rated them high at that time. Yep.
Okay. Great. So what's the next step on that story? You were introduced to the CEOs, and so what happened next?
So it's an interesting segue because partially I had an interest not only for the mindfulness component, but we evolved into this platform. We'd all get into it, but partially it was I'd been in the online internet game space primarily before that. And if you think about gaming, it's all about monetizing on dopamine highs, if you will, right? It's just, click, 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 and the revenues go. So it's an addiction. It's a form of addiction, if you will. And WellBrain's premise is they were trying to solve the opiate epidemic and the addictive problems that happen with opiate and overprescribing of opiates. And also they had introduced some gamification elements into the system where people can practice certain types of meditation or mindfulness. And then there were some third-party solutions that give you your brainwave score. And then you could use that to drive adherence and also see how you can do better. So that all really appealed to me and resonated well. And it's like, wow, I can take elements of the gaming industry and apply it and make this a much more robust solution. So I felt that that was a great opportunity. So initially, Dr. Ruben Kalra, who's the founder of WellBrain, he was the CEO. And I had joined as the COO and CTO, and given my past experiences. And then I've also been CEOs of other startups as well. And so I've had leadership positions in that aspect and raised capital. And then over a year and a half, we did go through initial hiccup. And then after that hiccup, I gradually transitioned and they asked me to take over as CEO. So that's how the relation developed with respect to WellBrain.
Fantastic. There's so many lessons for new entrepreneurs in that story. So I just want to maybe take a
Right.
couple of minutes and explore that. The first thing is there's a huge difference between a founder and a CEO.
Yeah.
I think that's a lesson that you sort of learned. But most entrepreneurs out there have to realize that if they might be an amazing founder, but they may not necessarily be amazing CEOs. CEOs by definition are operators, and you have to sort of be involved in the company. So that's a really important lesson. And then the other thing you'd sort of touched on was there was a hiccup, and you sort of joined the company afterwards. And that, tell me a little bit more about that, because that sort of pivot, the transition, are extremely important in a sort of a entrepreneurial journey, right? So you sort of have to know when to steadfast and when to pivot. So tell me a little bit about that. What was happening with the company at the time, and what happened after you took over?
Right. So I'll answer that question. The quick comment on the earlier lesson learned is
Yep.
yes, for other entrepreneurs, sometimes I myself have been a founder, a co-founder, and through the school of hard knocks and enough experience, then you can build that. We were able to scale my previous companies to a couple hundred people. So then you gain that management experience.
Right.
And having said that, yes, there are sometimes distinctions between CEOs and founders, but sometimes initially you have to start somewhere. And initially I was like a co-founder, but then yes, operationally, there are things you can draw upon that you can then decompress or decelerate, I should say, accelerate changes that happen. So with respect to the first pivot, what was happening is we were growing. We first did a product market fit launch. So as soon as I joined the company, there was like very little revenues. And within 6 months' time, putting my product hat on, because I was doing CEO, CTO stuff, effectively trying to get the product out the door. And we had a team of 4 or 5, and we were able to get the product out the door, and we were ramping up in revenues. And within 6 months, we were at 20,000 monthly recurring revenue. And what happened was, in the digital health space, one of the things compared to any other industry I've seen, you have to have the wherewithal to have the lasting power to get the product market fit right. But at the same time, sometimes things change. So when you're trying to enact change, it takes forever. But when the industry makes change, sometimes it could be overnight. So what was happening was, in the digital health space, you might be familiar with these aspects of what are called CPT codes or ICD-10 codes. These are the codes that people use to get reimbursed through insurance or Medicare. We are not directly related to codes itself, but how our physicians would get reimbursed, and we can get into that, how WellBrain works. That code just disappeared. And overnight, it kind of flipped the company on its head in the sense, and it was like a 2 to 3 month resonation throughout the industry where physicians were like, oh, why isn't this code not working? I thought you said it was working. And we were like, well, hang on. So in these type of situations, we're a small company, and then ultimately we had to figure out what to do. And the advice was speak to the American Medical Association. And we're like, okay, that's like speaking to, the head of the FDA, just like, okay, yeah, I'll just make a phone call.
Let me just pick up the phone. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't do that. So,
You're right.
Of course, just like anything else, you talk to a couple high-powered law firms or law firms that work with, and then you try to find a nuanced law firm, because either you're going to spend $50,000 or you could be creative and find someone who could help you out for $8,000 to $10,000. So we had a relationship with someone, and then they said, yes, we know how to write to the AMA. And just a quick side note on the AMA, it's like a black box. And literally all communication with them is like serial number at ama.com. So you have no idea who the person is. You can't even look them up. And that's how the communication works. What came out of that exercise was they said, WellBrain, yes, you are doing great. But then we got positively sanctioned by the AMA. It says, by the way, there are these new codes that have been released. And interesting enough, that was public knowledge, but 99.9% of the environment didn't know about it. And as soon as we figured that out, I was getting calls from all these other venture capitalists and other portfolio companies saying, "Hey, Sumeet, can you just give us the code?" And we're just, I was like, well, we took a revenue loss of this and we spent, X number of dollars. It's like, not right now. We don't feel comfortable, but maybe in a year's time. But it was interesting.
Right.
So that helped us pivot. So, and then we had to change some of the product to encompass that. And largely because it was a misinterpretation in the sense that those codes were initially meant for psychologists to use. But what WellBrain is in its ecosystem is to enable psychological services and other types of solutions, which is being mandated by the federal government now. But at that time, the average physician shouldn't have been using that code, but it wasn't clear until the AMA made it clear. And so, yeah, that's an example
Okay.
of how we had to, now to get all that information, it took us 3 to 4 months. And so we were kind of like spinning, not in circles, but we're in no man's land until we heard from the AMA. And then
Right.
once we heard from the AMA, then we were able to execute to our next stage.
Right, right, right. That's so interesting that, in medical space, you're a lot of times you're at the mercy of the insurance companies or
Yeah,
AMAs or, the
right,
mandates that sort of come down from high above and you
right,
sort of have to work with them. So I think that this background was really important and I wanted to make sure we covered that first. But now let's get into the company
right.
and tell me a little bit about, the problem that's out there and the solution you're working on. You hinted on a lot of different things, including the opioid epidemic and, sort of the mental wellness space. Tell me exactly how what the problem is and what the solution you're developing.
Right. So most people know about the opiate epidemic. However, just for clarification, yes, the opiate epidemic is huge. The secondary problem is people aren't getting better. And the tertiary problem is existing solutions aren't resolving the problem with many people. So WellBrain is solving this first, second, and third order. So WellBrain is a digital health chronic pain management platform and behavioral health platform that enables physicians to choose from an array of what we call evidence-based non-opiate modalities to treat chronic pain, fight the opiate epidemic, and ultimately save lives. So what we're doing is we're giving physicians a comprehensive tool chest to better address chronic pain and then prevent the use or additional use of these opiates, and also give physicians an easier way to offer these types of solutions all in a neat toolbox, if you will. So think of us as an app store for physicians to choose, and then they can better administer these course of actions with their patient and then better manage them, and then also enable them to longitudinally track them. So in a nutshell, what we are in a product sense is Envision. It's an iPad app. It's also what we call a web app. So it's entirely COVID enabled. And then it's a smartphone app for the patient to use at home called the WellBrain Go. So the baseline use case is the patient sees the doctor in a hospital or in a provider setting, like a clinic office.
Mm-hmm.
As you're waiting for the physician to come in, the medical system will take your temperature and then have you answer certain types of assessments. Those assessments, if you will, are reimbursable, but at the same time, they get introduced to a deep breathing exercise of mindfulness and then introduce the patient on these customized guided meditations, and then they can opt in to use the smartphone app at home. And then beyond that, we've introduced additional sets of services that the physician can implement, and then the patient can also use at home, and then we increase that physician-patient communication. So what we do is ultimately is the initial results with respect to WellBrain is in as little as 5 weeks of use, we've seen, if you just practice just on the mindfulness component, and I'll get into the other benefits of WellBrain, for 10 minutes a day, for 3 times a week, for at least 5 weeks, we saw this with 2 sets of 3,000 patients, a 14% reduction in their opiate prescriptions and their electronic health record outcomes. We tracked 18% reduction in emergency room visits. So that, this generates the interest of the insurance companies. And then the most important factor, which is subjective, and there'll be other studies whether it's placebo or not, but what we found was effectively 1/3 of the patients had a 31% reduction in their pain scores. So if you think of your pain score from 1 to 10, let's say you scored a 9, in 5 weeks you went down to a 6. So the impact is quite profound. And I will say what a winning formula is, there is a patient of a physician where for years he had gone through multiple surgeries, multiple treatment options, and never got better with his chronic back pain. And then he had contacted me and said, look, Sumeet, this is the first time in my life I'm able to better manage my pain. And at the same time, and more importantly, he's able to go to work on a consistent basis. So many people don't know. Yes, we know about chronic pain, but there's so many other components of it that emotionally affect the patient. And a lot of these nuances, you don't realize how you are engendering them and helping them out. And actually, we're helping the physicians help them out. Right. So that is the first aspect of the story. So we optimize the provider, payer, patient economics, if you will. So physician gets reimbursed for this initial set of services. And then what we did was, because we have a very strong scientific advisory board, which is our 3 founding physicians are on, and about 8 to 10 of our physician customers. Some of them have asked to be investors because they like the product so much. We are physician driven on the B2B side and then patient driven on the B2C side. So we're trying to intersect those product requirements into a more robust platform. So as I said, we're an array of evidence-based non-opiate modalities. We have the first mindfulness component, but now we're also have a strategic component saying these type of assessments also enable physicians to do faster approval with insurance companies for outpatient procedures for spinal cord stimulation and peripheral nerve stimulation. What this is, it's a technology or industry called neuromodulation, or effectively it's electrical impulse that defeats pain. So hence, it's another type of solution without the use of the pill. So WellBrain works really well in enabling many of these pain providers to get faster approval with the insurance companies. And sometimes WellBrain acts as a proxy for a psychologist, if you will, because all the data and everything we collect, it's enough information to then get submitted approval for the insurance, like specifically Medicare. Privates have additional requirements. So then this becomes another service. Third is this has been our fastest growing service, and it's all related to the base core line technology of those assessments. We've developed a WellBrain brain health score based on what's known as behavioral health, BHI, behavioral health intervention. And what that does is it enables any physician to test the patient while they're at home and get reimbursed for these activities. So now if you think about it, many times when you go see the doctor, you usually don't give them an update till you speak with them again, now through a Zoom call. This is an active way to get additional data on their pain, mood, sleep, and other psychological effects, such that the physician or his staff or her staff can look at the data and not only get reimbursed for it, but then do some proactive recommendations to the patient in between the actual physical sessions. So it's enabling the physician to schedule more visits or more proactive or corrective action in the effort to get the patient better.
Right.
So as you see, the parallel where this comes in from the gaming industry, which I'll let you jump in a second, but we built this from a point solution to a platform. And my experience in the gaming industry is we started out with content and then realized, oh, we had to build all these tools and mechanisms around the content. And then we scaled to 50 million users. Then we realized, hey, we don't want to be the entertainment hits business, because then our success is kind of like venture capital or a movie studio, right? You have to keep producing 10 different titles and maybe 2 will be successful. What we found was we had all the mechanisms and the distribution channel. We started licensing content, if you will. So now what's happening with WellBrain is the core revenue model or what distribution channel right now is physicians. initially at clinics. We'll be expanding to hospitals. But what's happening now is well-funded third-party apps that are point solution in the digital health realm. They want access to our distribution channel. And this fits in well in our rubric, if you will, because most pain physicians want to track patients holistically in the sense of, exercise, diet, sleep, and all these components. So now we're looking at a back app, if you will, one from potentially Europe or another one that's locally based, and there are reimbursement codes associated. But more importantly, all this data capture will ultimately become the main reason for WellBrain is we already have vast data sets of longitudinal history of many patients and their physicians, but we will become an ultimately a deep learning pattern recognition engine such that we can normalize patient outcomes across the country and then become a recommendation engine saying, oh, okay, we've seen 175 physicians do this, this, and this, and then we've seen an 88% success rate if they do 2 months of mindfulness, 40% of them get an outpatient procedure, and maybe 20% get this with whatever success rate. So now it takes the guesswork. And I will say that behavioral health component, the WellBrain use case is not only limited to pain physicians, but any type of physician that has a longitudinal relationship with patients. So now we're expanding the thing. So I guess it's a little long answer.
But that's a very important thing to recognize that, a lot of times when we start talking about, wellness and, breathing, yoga, all of these kinds of things, the woo alarm goes off and people sort of phase out. But when you combine that with the data that you're collecting, real-time data from patients, from physicians, and you're actually measuring, the opioid consumption going down against those other activities, now you have something, right? Now you have a proven proven record of, these things actually help, and it's not just woo. It's something that's reliable and repeatable. So I think that's really important. And working with other apps, I think, is also a very interesting concept, because a lot of other people don't necessarily, they might specialize in meditation, for example, but they don't necessarily have that medical connection to the community. So they're not benefiting from those codes or from the direct relationship with physicians. So I think that's a really interesting vector for WellBrain. So I know you touched on this a little bit, but I want to understand the team a little bit more, because you are very much focused on the medical community, and the company was founded by doctors. So tell me a little bit about what your team looks like, the doctors that founded the company, who's working with the company today, and then we'll also get into the advisors. But let's start with the founders and the team.
So the company was founded by Dr. Ruben Kalra, Dr. Richard Longton, and Dr. Richard Shinneman and Dr. William Longton. And they operate PMC, which is 5-center pain clinics in the Bay Area with 30 to 40,000 patients. So they're always looking at different types of solutions, how to better treat their patients. And like I explained earlier, they noticed this opiate epidemic, and that's how they said, hey, let's build something for patients here in the West based on the longitudinal studies they had done. So initially, what had happened was they noticed their patients weren't getting better. They were suffering from anxiety and depression. And they said, you know what, there's got to be a better solution out there to treat the patients. So what we did was we found a researcher, or they did, through TED. And this researcher had done a 2-year study, and they further enhanced that study of Buddhist monks in India. And based on those that were in chronic pain and not in chronic pain, that they found that the evidence was off the charts. And then, so that's how the genesis of WellBrain became. Now, with respect to the operations of WellBrain, Dr. Ruben Kalra is quite active. He's got the, like the founder, the visionary mindset, if you will. And then he has the industry relationships, specifically in the neuromodulation space. So he helps out in all those arenas, and then also on some on the investment side. But he's also the chief medical officer, and technically, two physicians are chief medical officers, but their specialties are nuanced. So Dr. William Longton has specialized, if we're going to do more research, if you will, and that's his background. He was one of the first physicians to come out of the Stanford Pain Institute when pain became a sub-practice. I wasn't aware that pain was a sub-practice till I met these guys. It comes out of anesthesiology, right? That's acute pain, but this is chronic pain. And chronic pain is defined as those 3 months or longer. And Dr. Richard Shinneman, he was really core on the content. So initially when we did our mindfulness aspect of it, we actually made it medically relevant to the type of pain. So these physicians scripted it. And a funny story, we used to have a chief Zen officer who was a former Buddhist ordained monk who recorded a lot of these things. And so Dr. Richard Shinneman gets involved on the content or any other types of aspects. He studied Tai Chi, he's done all these other aspects. So they provide inputs in that. In addition to this, we have about, I've lost track, 8 to 10 active practicing physicians across the country who really contribute their input in the sense. So what we do is, one of the benefits of WellBrain is because of this access to not only the physicians who are paying us, but some of the physicians who have the practice, I use it as a living laboratory, if you will, which many companies don't have that luxury. So if we want to make this tweak or change X or introduce a new service, we'll validate it through their offices down to the medical staff looking at it, down to the billing, how it works through the whole ecosystem. And then as we champion it internally, we spin it out and push it out. So that's a great benefit. So these physicians give us ideas on how to improve the product or what they see and don't see. And that's provided a great benefit. So as far as the team, those are the founders. Like I said, Dr. Ruben Kalra is more active, and we'll engage some of the other founders when it's needed. And then we also have a former Stanford researcher who has his own pain practice, and he's published 70 papers. And Dr. Joy Sclafani is now starting to take a look at the data. So we're a small team. We have not looked at our data sets that I was explained to you, except from some cursory looks. And that's where he's asking questions of the database. Can this X factor be answered by Y vector, what have you not? So him and another physician are looking at that in detail as we speak, and they're going to start gleaning additional information. And then if they want additional information answered, we'll start putting it into our WellBrain system. So then these type of things can be parlayed out into the ecosystem. So you can see it's that active feedback. And then right now we're very small. It's 4 people. I have a product/salesperson, and then 2 overseas developers. One's the front end and one's back end. So we're quite lean, if you will, and now we're entering into this growth mode.
Got it. Give me an idea of the timeline. So when did you start to roll out into the market? You said you joined the company in 2017, but I think that was initially as an advisor. So when did you take over, and what does the ramp look like? Give me just sort of a sense of that.
Right. So I took the CEO role in 2018.
Okay.
So yeah, the ramp looks like this in the sense that, yes, we were generating some revenues and had to carry the company. And then, so historically, the company had raised 1.1 million in equity when I joined, and then I'm doing this follow on, so additional 1 million, so 2 million in total. Now, as far as revenues, we've practically doubled in the last 2 years. It was about 90,000, 189,000 in 2019. And this year we're tracking, initially, we haven't seen much of a hiccup in COVID, but there is some hiccup. So we're tracking at 300 to, I want to say 300 to 450. It all depends. It's a wide range, but that's a ballpark estimate for this year. So that's how we're ramping up. But we have so many industry relationships in place, and these are concrete relationships. So one of the things, aspect of us scaling is our product is so good now, I have an immediate need to expand the sales team, and we don't have to have a full sales force. We could scale this with 2 or 3 people or maybe 4, and I just need a couple more customer success. What's happening is we have strategic relationships with many of the medical device companies, some of them to the point where we're ingrained into their sales channel, meaning their sales reps are actively now referring practice to us, largely because if you think about it, when I explained about the neuromodulation aspect, prior to WellBrain, it would take maybe 2 to 3 months on average to get approval. With WellBrain in some states like Texas, physicians are getting approval in 2 days. So indirectly, if you think we're a sales augmentation of these entities, but we're playing very careful, all legal, because we don't want to violate any inducement or anything. There's nothing like that. It's just because WellBrain is very effective in that. So what's happening as a consequence for scaling is their sales force is becoming our sales force.
Right.
So before we used to grow largely through conferences and word of mouth. Now it's our physicians actively inbound requesting us and saying, can you set up a referral program, because they're motivated. And then we're going to get a pipeline of customers through these channels. And if you take the 4 largest medical device companies in this space, these are the Abbotts, the Boston Scientifics, the Nevros, and several others.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big distribution channel. And then what will happen is, it's happening right now as we speak, as we channel that scale up, we're already starting to attract, as expected, some smaller hospital systems. So we're working on some smaller contracts. There's an IDN, which is a type of hospital network, if you will, in Southeast Tennessee called Ballot Health Systems. So once we get to that level, we're slowly moving into the enterprise space. But these hospitals wanted to see the validation through our distribution of physicians. Right now, we have about 150 physicians contracted it, and maybe 50 to 60 are using it actively. The rest will follow through accordingly. What happens is usually you sign on a practice of 4 to 5 physicians. One will use it, and then over time, the second one will use it, and the third one.
Right. And as they talk amongst themselves, it goes exponential.
Right. So I will tell you one thing. I've with this small team, I physically haven't met, which should be the case with any digital or technology solution, 90% of my physicians or customers.
Right.
Never. Right. The only time I met them is if we're at a conference and they recognize us, WellBrain, it's like, hey, so it's kind of interesting that way. So it is digital. The other significant thing I will say in this COVID environment is we're enabling many practices to become relevant, and even hospitals to also get these secondary revenue streams in place. And these are to the tunes of, for a hospital system, may be small, but it's still beneficial because you're actively tracking patients. But on an average provider basis, we charge a software as a service model. And think AWS, as we introduce more of those services, like I was saying, we can charge more for each service. And so our same source to sales will increase, but anywhere from $600 to $1,000 or even up to $2,000 a month, physicians pay us, and they can generate anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 or $15,000 a month, depending on if they do these outpatient procedures or not. So there's a lot of pluses, and you're also getting improved patient satisfaction or patient outcomes, if you will. So, yeah.
And I think the fact that, now there's such a large focus on telehealth and patients wanting that immediate access, they can give their pain scores right away to the doctors, and they can check, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, even without having those scheduled appointments. I think all of that is working in your favor. The telehealth system is working in your favor. So I think that's very important in this COVID era.
Yeah. We think of us as a second order telehealth solution. So think about it, telehealth, because of what the federal government has issued in this COVID environment.
Right.
Before, you had to have a specific telehealth approved app or solution that's end-to-end HIPAA compliant, but now people are doing it through Skype and Zoom. And I don't think that's going to change. There'll probably be some nuances, but what can you do beyond just the physician talking to the patient or the medical? That's where WellBrain comes into play. So everything that we've designed for the iPad, it's easily designed on the web where the staff can click, the patient can answer, data is given, like you said, to the physician, and you can talk about it. And that's a second order thing through telehealth, if you will. So
Right.
it's kind of an app of telehealth, even though we're not exactly telehealth. So
Right,
yeah.
right. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So you, I'm happy to hear that COVID really didn't slow you down much, and if anything, it's probably helping you in the upswing.
Right.
Talk to me about what the second half of 2020 looks like, and then going into 2021. What kind of growth are you expecting if you had those extra salespeople that on your team? So you said you wanted two or three more people. Um, how many patients? Well, give us an idea of how many patients are on your platform now,
Mhm.
and then how many patients by end of 2020, and then going into 2021, just so we understand that hockey stick.
Right. So I think where we are right now is we're literally entering in a high growth mode to the point where, since I have a small team and working capital is a little bit of issue, I am also looking to close on the soft circle of a 2-3 million next round raise.
Okay.
And the reason being is, so what's happening on a growth perspective, at least for the rest of the year, is one or two of those relationships that I spoke to you about earlier, one of them asked us, like, we're going to give you 10 highly qualified key opinion leader, not even leads. This is like, you get to the video demo stage, and then you can close these contracts, 10 per week. With a small team, we can't handle that. So I had to push back down to 3. That's just temporarily. So I need that customer success and everything. If we can capture 10 per week, and if all of them turn into contract, the average time is about 4 to 6 weeks. It used to be 22 touch points. We've dropped it down to 11. So our user acquisition costs, if you value each touch point as, say, $100, was $2,200 to $3,500. It's halved. And then our break even is about, what used to be 6 months has dropped to 4 months. And then the average customer life, usually, unless they get acquired or something, if they stay with us for the first 2 months, they remain a customer. And so what it looks
And when you
like,
say customer, sorry, when you say customer, you're talking about the physician.
physicians, yes.
Okay.
So on average, on the physician side, like I said, we have about 30 to 35 practices. These are actual individual contracts. We can probably scale up to, even if I had my full team in place, I'd double that by December.
Okay.
Given that I don't have that, and I have to, there are a little bit of nuances because one of the person has to leave for personal reasons. But anyways, that's where we are. So we're looking to track at that 350 to 500,000 in revenue for this year. But then next year, based on this momentum, the projections we have is a 2 million, 1.5 to 2 million revenue rate. And I will say our average revenue, like I said, is anywhere from $600 to $1,000 per practice, or even higher. And then if you just multiply that or divide it out, that's the number of physicians we'll have. And I don't think that should be a problem. And then the second thing is, on the patient side, we haven't even thought about monetizing it. So what happens now is the WellBrain Go app is for free, but you have to get the login and password by visiting a physician. So we get a lot of inbound traffic saying, hey, I want to use your system. How can I use it? And some of the development efforts one of the things I was a pioneer in, we actually own the trademark, is the free to play and freemium business models.
Okay.
We actually, in the early 2000s, when no one believed us, and now everyone uses it as a common thing. And so one of the things we'll want to do is make our B2C side open to the general public, and then have that be a funnel to doctors as well. But right now, in the patients, from a scaling perspective, we're at about 50,000 plus patients track longitudinally on the assessments. On the mindfulness component, probably 25,000 are using it. But I would say active, we still have to build a better, robust reminder and system like that. So it's probably a magnitude order of less than that. So that's where we are. But if I have a full team in place, I'd have a head of the B2B side and a head of the B2C side. We've kind of perfected the B2B aspects. We have to focus some on the B2C, and we could probably monetize the B2C, but right now it's fine offering all these mindfulness components and other parameters for free for the patients.
Right.
So yeah, that's where the company looks like right now, and I'm pretty bullish. And in the COVID environment, our physician-related revenue sales, we have multiple revenue streams. So one is through providers, where they pay us those SaaS fees, and that's grown about 8 to 9% month over month over the last several months. And then we have a secondary revenue stream, which is platform access fees. These are the strategic relationships with some of the third parties I was telling you with, like right now it's the medical device companies, where we have their actual medical content that patients get exposed to, and they pay us for that. And similarly, as we expand the platform, we'll have these platform access fees. So those are the two core components. And yeah, so that's what the WellBrain environment looks like right now.
Fantastic, fantastic. So a lot of exciting things coming up. So I'm very happy about that. And I know investors that are watching this are probably going to have a ton of questions for you. So to the extent they want to leave them in a public forum, they can leave it in the comments below, or they can let me know or reach out to you directly, and we'll be happy to answer them. And for investors who are more serious, once they're on our platform, they'll be able to access your pitch deck and all of the financial stuff that they might require, and obviously have direct communication. So we'll work on getting you all of those things and hopefully get you some investors in the process. So thank you so much for coming on today, and I look forward to hopefully introducing you to some investors and getting you the resources you need to scale up the company.
Yeah, it's great. I think one of the reasons I decided to do this, it's capitalistic, and it's also improving people's lives, and ultimately, I mean, we could probably calculate that we are saving lives. So it's a profound thing. So that way, it's a good endeavor. And one comment I will live with: digital health compared to other sectors, obviously it takes a longer ramp up period to do the product market fit. But then once you sow that needle and or thread that needle, that's where the hockey stick happens. So,
right. Absolutely. And sounds like you're well on your way. So I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was a great interview. I want to thank Sumeet again for coming on and talking with us. I really appreciated the conversation. I think we were able to get a great insight into WellBrain and what the company is trying to achieve. Again, if you're an investor and are looking to invest in this company, please get in touch with us. My email address is on screen now, and it's in the description below. We'll be happy to answer any questions. And if you want, we can put you in touch with Sumeet so you can continue with your due diligence process. If you're a startup and are looking to join our network, please go to our website. It's www.startupsteroid.com. Click on the founder link and fill out the form so we can add you to our database, and hopefully you can be next on this show. So with that, thank you for joining me, and I will see you again tomorrow.